Well, it looks like just about everybody is here, right? Dhamadipa, you're here and ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay, just give it a few more seconds for everyone to come in that's going to come. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us again for the Brahma Vihara retreat. This afternoon session will be led by BGR board member Dhamadipa from the Aloka Vihara Forest Monastery in Placerville, California. Dhamadipa, we're so happy to have you here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Wonderful. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the second session of our BGR Benefit Retreat. It is always a treat for me to see all of you taking care of your lives in this way by coming and practicing the Brahma Viharas. So as Bhante mentioned earlier, as Venerable mentioned earlier, I want to share a little bit with you about another form of metta practice. And just to say, so the Brahma Viharas are mentioned many times throughout the Nikayas, the Pali texts, and metta in particular is mentioned most often of the four of them by the Buddha and by other disciples, esteemed disciples. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and about why that might be the case later. But for now, what I wanted to do was to share one of the ways in which the Buddha described doing the practice of metta and of the Brahma Viharas that is basically, I would say, taking a mundane example of kindness or of loving care and turning it into a universal. So one way to do that is this practice, this form of the practice called the radiating form. And Vaishali, if you could bring up the instructions for that, I would appreciate it.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So there we have them. And again, I'm going to say a little bit more about these folks, the Kalamas, and this part at the beginning there. But moving to about halfway on that second line, begins the instruction for the radiating form of metta. And I want to say this form of practice, it doesn't require necessarily being able to individually encompass everyone in your practice. That's the strength of it, actually, that it can become a universal loving kindness that is pervading all beings and all space, and thereby kind of overcome any kind of barriers that you might have to individual groups of people or to particular types of space or even beings that you don't know about or understand. So if we come to about the middle here, we see that there is this dwells pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness. So this reference to 1/4 means literally 1/4 of the space in a circle. So it's kind of like a directional instruction. So 1/4 would be all of the space in front of you, for example. And then the second quarter would be all of the space to one side of you. And then the third quarter, the space behind you. And the fourth quarter, the space to the other side of you. So it's looking at, it's basically pointing the mind in these various directions so as to make the metta pervade all of those directions. And this word that's being translated here is mind, is with a mind is chaitana, so with the heart mind, right? With all of what we might think of in Western terms as the mind, including our feelings and thoughts. So everything that's happening in the cognitive space. And then there's above and below. So again, looking at the directional. So having gone the 4 directions in order, and then above and below, and everywhere, to oneself as well as to the entire world. So just as we saw earlier with the phrases, metta, this form of radiating metta practice, is not just applied to others and not just applied to oneself, but again, universal for all. And then there are these last words there. So vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity and without ill will. And that is part of the beauty of this form of metta, the radiating form of metta, is that it can actually enable us to experience the vastness of the mind, the mind that rises above our struggles, that is measureless, or sometimes this word is also called immeasurable, as was referred to earlier, right? So it doesn't fit into a measuring cup. You can't go next door to your neighbor and pick up a bit of metta. So it's just immeasurable and boundless. And without enmity and ill will, right? So those things cannot coexist in the mind. When there is metta in the mind, then there's no room for ill will. They don't hang out together. So these are the instructions that the Buddha gave, and just as you can see, it's a very specific form of practice. It's a very methodical way of thinking about how to fill the mind and fill it in such a way that it is encompassing everything. And that may seem quite lofty, but we're going to go ahead and give it a try today. So, and as you see also here, one thing I want to mention before we stop the share screen is that you see that this form of the radiating, the Brahma Viharas, applies to all 4 of them. This is a way in which this practice can be done for all 4 of the Brahma Viharas. So you see there in about the middle of that paragraph, you see that it says a mind imbued with loving kindness, and a mind imbued with compassion, a mind imbued with altruistic joy or empathetic joy, and a mind imbued with equanimity. And not all at the same time, however. So we're just going to try one at a time, and we're going to begin with our theme of metta today. And then as I said, I'll go on to hopefully say a bit more about why so much emphasis on this particular quality of mind, and and how it, what's the promise of metta, so to speak. So I think I'm done with this piece of it. Vaishali, if you would. Thank you. Great. Right. So we'll go ahead and give it a try. So I'm going to go ahead and lead a guided meditation now on radiating metta. And before we do that, it's helpful if you think for a bit about an image that might help spark this feeling in you, this feeling of kindness. So one place to start might be some of those beautiful images we saw earlier today, those smiling kids, or those women in community, learning new skills or planting new crops. So that might be one place to start. Or it could be, oftentimes people would use a puppy or a kitten or a panda bear, or one monastic I know said he uses squirrels as his metta image. So it's good to think about some kind of image that would evoke a feeling of kindness in you, that would evoke a sense of like, oh, yes, may that being be well. And it could be a person, it could be a baby or someone that you know, but it's best if it is an image that's very simple, a moment that's very simple and uncomplicated. And oftentimes our closest relationships can be much more nuanced than that. So they might not be actually the ideal metta image to bring forth. But you can think about that, ponder that for a moment. And I'm going to give you a minute or two to think about what image might be evoking a sense of kindness, a sense of wishing well-being on another being. Yes, so hopefully at this point, you've gathered up some kind of an idea, some kind of an image that you can bring to mind when we get to that point in the meditation. If not, then you can try something spontaneously and feel free to change it up. I find that from my personal practice that it can be helpful to try something different, to try a new metta image once in a while. So, but for now, let's go ahead then and get seated in a meditation posture. Or perhaps you're lying down, depending on the needs of your body, or standing, any particular meditation posture that is supportive for you to find stability, a steady posture. We're going to sit for a bit. We're going to sit for about 35 to 40 minutes. And of course, you don't need to be perfectly still during that time, but to the extent that you can find a posture that you can maintain, that will help you to focus on the meditation itself. And ideally, finding this stable, grounded posture will then also allow you to straighten the spine and be alert and open. This is an open-hearted practice that we do, both physically and mentally. And having found this grounded, upright posture, then also relaxing, allowing the weight of the body to be carried on the bones so that the muscles can soften and widen and relax. It's fine to put your hands flat on your thighs. If that helps you to relax, that's usually a posture that soothes the energy. Or if you're feeling sleepy or tired, then you can gather your hands together in your lap, bringing those energies together. It's fine to allow the eyes to be slightly open at this point, if that helps you to be present in this moment. And eventually you'll want to allow them to just gently relax and close, softly close. So at this point, you can bring to mind that image that evokes the feeling of kindness, of awe. May that being be well. Bringing that image to mind. Holding it there, recalling the mundane sense of kindness that image evokes. And if for whatever reason your image isn't bringing to mind kindness, then you might consider just shifting to something else, trying a different image. Oh, metta, kindness, right? So, having established this image in your mind, some sort of feeling of kindness is arising, possibly. And when you begin to feel that sense of kindness arising, you might also find that it has a feeling in the body. So maybe that kindness brings a smile to your face. or it brings a little twinkle to your eye, or maybe a sense of warmth in the center of your chest. Just observing whether that's true, whether there's some feeling that you can sense in the body because of this presence of kindness in the mind. And if you're not feeling it, that's okay. You just stay with that image. Just stay with the memory of kindness, with the thought of kindness. And if you are finding some feeling in the body, then you may want to begin now to gather that energy up in your heart center. So, in the center of your chest, some people like to put their hand there as a way of thinking about gathering up the energy of kindness right there in the heart center. So, with the in breath, that energy of kindness is coming to the heart center and sparking a kind of light there. Mm. So, with each in breath, kindness gathering in your heart center, creating a little spark, a little glow there. Breathing in, kindness gathering there in your heart center. No need to worry about whether it's big or it's small. Just a glow there in your heart center. And stoking it a little at a time with the in breath. So just like a little fire, the light of a fire, each in breath, brightening that light of kindness there in your heart. So at this point, if you're not feeling it, you can just stay with the image. Or if you feel you see some warmth gathering there in your heart, then you can release the image and just stay with the breath, brightening that light. So imagining that light growing a little at a time. No need to strain at all. Just letting the breath and the intention transform that kindness, that mundane kindness, into this beautiful light. Breathing in and brightening. And now on the out breath, you're just going to let it flow. No pushing needed. Just like any light, it naturally wants to just flow in all directions. So breathing in and brightening the light of metta, kindness, universal loving kindness. And breathing out and letting it flow in all directions. Breathing in and brightening the light. And breathing out and letting it flow. Returning to the image if you lose the thread. And then once that light is established, just letting it flow. And now, just as the Buddha said, we're going to check out all the directions. So imagining that light of metta flowing immeasurably, flowing boundlessly directly in front of you. Naturally letting that light flow as far as it needs to go. And now imagining to the right of you, a light flowing boundlessly to the right of you. It's passing through all things without harm, just flowing. And now behind you, metta, light of metta flowing. And now shifting to the left of you, light of metta flowing to the left, boundless, just going naturally as light wants to do. And now above you, light of metta flowing all the way up from your heart center through your body and flowing above you. And now flowing below you, all the way down through the body and flowing below you boundlessly. So now light of metta in all directions. Again, breathing in and brightening that light. So that on the out breath, it just flows through you and beyond you. That light of loving kindness flowing in all directions. Brightening that light with the in-breath and letting it flow on the out-breath. Metta flowing in all directions. Filling up the mind and the heart, full of light, the light of kindness, loving kindness. knowing that in this moment you're also bathed in the loving kindness of everyone else here who's practicing this. At times, it can be helpful to return to the directions, loving kindness flowing in front of you, to the right of you, behind you, to the left of you, above you, and below you. All throughout your body and beyond. returning to the breath and using that inhalation to brighten that light of kindness, strengthening it so that it can flow even further. Even brighter. And now, in these last few minutes of the meditation, slowly, slowly allowing that light of metta to just fade away without contracting the mind, just allowing the light to just gently fade away. And observe that spaciousness that's left behind. Now coming back into the body, the physical sensation of breath, breathing the body naturally. Beautiful. So we've arrived at the end of our first taste of radiating metta meditation. And what I'd like to do at this point is take a bit of a break, stretch break. You can do some meditation and movement if you like. And we'll meet back here at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. So just about 5 or 6 minutes from now, we'll see each other back here. And at that time, I'd like to offer a Dhamma reflection and allow a little time for question and answer. So I hope to see you then.
Thank you, everybody. We'll be back.
Okay, so we're back again. Yes, Carla, were you ready to
I
get
was just,
started?
yeah, please, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, Ayadama Deepa.
Okay, great. So I'd like to begin with the homages. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Our theme here today is metta, loving kindness or universal kindness. And it's an important topic these days, just as much as it has been an important topic for thousands of years. In the contemporary world, we are exposed to a lot of information, unless we are specifically avoiding it. I would say the fact that you all are here online together, gathered together today, means that you have access at your fingertips to all kinds of communications, all kinds of experiences of people and events going on around the world. Different cultures, different values, different conflicts. And probably also some exposure to different spiritual cultures and values, different religious traditions and rituals, belief systems. Maybe some of which you agree with, some of which you don't agree with, some you don't really know. Right? So it's a world full of mixed messages. It's a world full of a lot of sometimes conflicting messages. And when I think about that situation, I'm reminded of a group of people that lived at the time of the Buddha. And they're a group of people called the Kalamas. The Kalamas. And so as the story goes, the Buddha was traveling through a town, Kesaputta is the name of the town. And the people that lived there were called the Kalamas, and approached the Buddha. They approached the Buddha and they said, because they approached the Buddha in part because they had heard that he was a realized being, that he was an awakened being, an enlightened being. And they approached the Buddha, and some of them respectfully and some of them not so respectfully. But they approached him and they asked, and they said, we often have ascetics and Brahmins come through here. So ascetics, perhaps we might understand them as seekers, and Brahmins meaning at that time in India, the highest social class, people who had been born into a life of expressing the spirituality of that culture. And so they said, well, we have a lot of ascetics and Brahmins that come through here, and they expound their doctrines and their teachings, and they tell us all about their way, and they disparage the doctrines and the teachings of others. right? But then some other ascetics and Brahmins come through and they tell us about their way, and they also disparage the teachings of others, the ones that came right before them, in fact, sometimes. And so they said to the Buddha, we are perplexed about this. We are perplexed about this. And the Buddha said, it is fitting that you should be perplexed about this. It is a perplexing thing. What to do, how to make sense of this, how to discern a skillful way to live our lives, a way that might fulfill our highest spiritual aims. And so he said, he told them, don't go by a certain list of things, as the Buddha sometimes did. Don't go by what? By oral tradition or by someone's lineage. So just because the way that they've been doing things is old doesn't mean that that's what you should follow. And don't go by hearsay. Just because somebody else said that this particular form of spirituality is great doesn't mean that that's accurate or that that's right for you. Or go by a collection of texts or scriptures. They didn't have printed books in the way that we know them now, but they had collections of scriptures, of teachings that were being orally transmitted. So you couldn't necessarily tell by that, by whether their scriptures made sense to you. So some of these are surprising. These things that the Buddha said are not the way that you could tell. He also said, don't go by logic or by inferential reasoning or by cogitation, as it's sometimes translated, by trying to analyze it or figure it out. And that, I think, is often one of the most surprising for folks, that the Buddha did not say. In fact, this particular sutta is often misquoted or misunderstood. The Buddha didn't say that you could just reason your way into a path of liberation. And to me, that makes sense because I think that it's hard for us to analyze or to even understand some things that we might not have experienced yet. And much of what you will be presented with on the spiritual path are things that are new, I hope. And finally, he said, don't go by the competence of the speaker because somebody happens to be eloquent or because this person is our guru, quote unquote, this person is in the role of a teacher. So how to discern if none of those ways work, if none of those things will help, then what will help? So the Buddha said, when you know for yourselves, when you in your personal lived experience know that some things are unwholesome, that some things lead to suffering, that some things lead to pain and harm, then you abandon them. You stop doing them. No matter who might have said that it's a good idea. And conversely, when you know for yourselves and when you experience it in your own life, that these things lead to welfare, to well-being, to happiness, to ending harm, then you take those things up, then you abide in them, then you live in accord with them. And so he asked the Kalamas, he said, well, what do you think about these things. Is it good to set down greed? Is it good to set down hatred? Is it good to clarify your confusion, clarify your delusion, set that down as best you can when you identify it? And they said, well, yeah, it seems like those would be good things to do. And so then the Buddha taught them the Brahma Viharas. He taught the Kalamas metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. In this radiating form that we just did a few moments ago. Because he said, that will be for your welfare. That will be for your happiness. That will be for your well-being. Give it a whirl. Try it for yourself and see. And so that's what we're doing here today. We're trying it for ourselves to see whether in fact that is the case. Right? And that in fact is one of the key promises of metta, is the joy and the nourishment of heart and the well-being that we can experience ourselves. That we have the capacity to bring into our own hearts and minds. And when we do that, then the whole world is changed. Not because we wish it to be that way. It's not some kind of Pollyanna thing. It's that when this heart and mind is nourished and joyful and more wholesome and brighter and clearer, then that can also extend to everything that this heart and mind comes into contact with, and everything that comes into contact with, and that comes into contact with, and so on. So when this heart mind is changed, then the world is changed. Not by wishing it to be so, but by actually practicing it. Making that the habit of the heart mind. By practicing it over and over again. By abiding in that space. And as I said earlier, it's beautiful in part because what we can do is we can take our mundane experience of love, of kindness, of compassion, of joy, of a kind of balanced, calm, grounded space of equanimity. We can take our mundane experience of these things, and by our intention and our breath and our mind, we can universalize it. We can grow it into something that goes beyond our struggles, our personal struggles, and the struggles of the world. We can grow it into something that goes even beyond our capacity for generosity and impartiality, because it's this form of mind, quality of mind. So that is a great gift. It's a wonderful practice. I have to say that metta came into my life because of exactly that, because of needing some kind of practice that would go beyond my personal struggles. So I had recently moved into the monastery and noticed that I woke up every morning furious. full of anger. And I couldn't, as far as I could tell, it didn't have anything to do with what my alarm clock sounded like, or what the first thing of the morning was, or the shape of my pillow, or what I needed to get done that day, or the last thing that somebody said to me before I went to sleep, or anything else. I was just carrying a lot of anger. And I had the great blessing that my American Zen teacher, Shosan Austin, said to me, "Gee, it sounds like you could really benefit from practicing metta." And I don't think that when she said that to me, that she realized that, I would still be doing it all these many years later, many, many, many years later, every day, multiple times a day, because it worked. I found that, just as the Buddha said, it has transformed my life, my heart. So I keep doing it, and I recommend it. So that's one side of it. That's one aspect of the promise of metta. But the other aspect that I want to point to, and as Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi said, he is going to talk a little bit more about the benefits of metta later on, I think. The 11 benefits that the Buddha laid out. But one other aspect that I want to talk about today is also the aspect of the other what I think of as the promise of metta, is an incredible clarity of mind. Metta and the other 3 Brahma Viharas, frankly, all of the Brahma Viharas, as a practice that leads to a spacious, clear, bright, flexible mind that can then actually engage in liberative insight, that can actually penetrate one's experience in such a way as to unlock the problem of suffering. And this is not an exaggeration. So it requires various causes and conditions to come into place, of course. But if we look at, for example, in Majjhima Nikaya 52, the Buddha lays out the 4 jhanas, each one of the 4 form jhanas. And then he lays out the 4 Brahma Viharas. And then he lays out 3 other formless meditations. Formless meditations. So it's a total of 11. But he lays out the Brahma Viharas, each one of them as a practice which, if fully engaged in, it could lead to a much greater transformation. So this was a conversation that the Buddha had with a man named Dasama. And he gives again this radiating form of practicing each one of the Brahma Viharas. And then he says, and then one understands, if one does this practice and then penetrates the understanding that this deliverance of mind through metta, for example, is conditioned and volitional, right? Is something that we are doing with intention, and that is based on the presence of its supporting causes and conditions. If we understand that, and therefore we understand that it's also subject to cessation, and the line in the sutta is, and one is steady in that, right? So having really grounded yourself in that teaching, then that insight can lead to the destruction of the taints right there. And he says, and if you delighted in it a lot, then you'd basically end up as a non-returner instead of the full destruction of the taints. So it's a very powerful, powerful practice. And he lists the four and he says, this is one thing that is proclaimed by the Tathagata as a path of practice that can lead an unliberated mind to liberation. And he says that about all 11 of those particular meditations that he lists in that sutta, and 4 of them are the Brahma Viharas. So why is this such a powerful practice? What is this? What is this incredible transformative ability that can be unlocked by metta? I would suggest that it has something to do with the way in which filling the mind with these bright, boundless, uplifted states leaves no room for the hindrances. When the mind is fully, the chitta, the heart mind, is fully pervaded by a Brahma Vihara, then there isn't room for the 5 hindrances to arise. And again, something about this openness of mind that is made possible by these boundless meditations. This is, I think, also why those 11 go together. Because of the immeasurable nature of those types of meditations. That kind of going beyond the kind of mundane constraints that you might feel in the everyday mind by opening it up in this way. So, for example, that's one of the reasons why at the end of our guided meditation earlier, I suggested that you could end by having a look at whether any spaciousness of mind was created once the energy of metta recedes. Then is that boundless nature still accessible? With practice, it is. With practice, it's definitely possible. And we can also experience that delight for ourselves. Not to say that you shouldn't go for the total destruction of the taints. By all means, go for it. But as we know, joy is an important aspect of practice. Right? It was a pivotal moment in the Buddha's own path when he speaks about recognizing that meditative joy was not something to be avoided, that it was actually the way to liberation. He speaks about that, right? So he had been doing these extremely austere meditative practices, right? Trying to control the mind, trying to control the breath, trying to control the eating. And time again, seeing how that isn't going to work. That's not going to bring an end to suffering. Any more than trying to have control in our day-to-day lives is going to bring an end to suffering. But by finding the path of meditative joy, right? So he has this beautiful memory of sitting under the crabapple tree. There are various ways that this story is told, but to tell it the way that I remember it. He has this beautiful experience of, as a child, watching his father working and sitting under the crabapple tree and entering this kind of very joyful, very grounded, perhaps first jhana state, some very immersed state of mind that brought up a lot of piti, right? And we're going to need joy if we're going to stay on the path, if we're going to actually be helping ourselves and others in this world full of crazy mixed messages. We're going to need to be able to nourish our hearts and minds in that way. To find the ability to incline the mind again and again and again toward loving kindness. So if there's anything that you might take away from this talk today, I would hope that it's that you don't underestimate the power of the Brahma Viharas. The power that they have to lead to welfare, to lead to less harm in the world and less suffering in your own life. And ultimately, the power that they have to clarify the mind such that it can find ultimate peace. So I think that's all I had to share with you today. I'm done a little bit earlier than I expected to be, but nonetheless, I think I'm going to go ahead and open it up for some questions and answers. And I don't know, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, if you are also available for some questions, if folks had some left over from this morning.
Yeah, that would be possible. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
All right, everyone, hands up will be recognized. Please unmute yourself if you are recognized by the teachers.
Yes, so Angela, I see that you have your hand up. I think you had your hand up earlier this morning too, huh?
Angela, are you muted still? Angela, it looks like you're muted. Could you please unmute yourself so you can ask your question?
Okay, I think we'll move on. And
We'll
Angela, if you get your microphone unmuted, then we'll come back to you, okay?
All right, I am sorry. I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to a few minutes ago. Sorry.
That's okay.
All right, I want to thank you both for today's session. I learned quite a bit. I have a question about the incorporating what we learned this afternoon with what we learned this morning. I was going to ask this morning about, do we do the four groups or 5 groups of people in every sitting, to self, and then, advisor, or, and then so on and so forth. I think 5 group people. Do we always have to do 5, all the different groups in every setting? And then what we learned today, this afternoon, the radiating, I thought, well, or people I'm thinking, it would be right in front of me. So I thought maybe this radiating thing is like toward the end when you want to radiating to, the entire space. So that's my question.
Okay, maybe I take at least from I guess there are many different ways of doing the metta meditation. The method that Aya Dhammadippa explained in this session, the radiation, is based on the formula that we find in the suttas. But my understanding, you see, the method that I explained is derived from a commentarial style work called the Visuddhimagga, which in turn, the Visuddhimagga is a kind of encyclopedic treatise on the different methods of meditation. And I believe its method of treating the loving kindness meditation, or of explaining it, is based on an earlier commentarial style work included in the Sutta Pitaka. So my supposition, this is my theory, is that the method of radiation would be suitable for those who have a natural disposition to loving kindness, for whom it comes quite easily and readily. But like many of us are still sort of like building up that disposition. So I see like the method of working through the individual persons is what I call the generating stage, where you're sort of taking concrete individuals and that come into one's acquaintance, and then sort of transforming one's attitude towards them by developing this metta as the wish for their well-being and happiness. So through all the years that I've been doing metta, I've always been doing it in this way, at least in the initial stages, working through the individuals. The extent to which you use the formula, there's a lot of flexibility in that. So I just found this particular formula I like because, I don't know, it just, the phrases seem to work well for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you have a lot of flexibility with the formula. You could choose 2 phrases, 3 phrases. If some of them don't work, throw it out, and you might take, may so-and-so be peaceful, or may so-and-so be, why, maybe that's going a little too far. May so-and-so be happy, may they be well, may they be peaceful, may they be healthy, whatever. But what's important is not so much the words of the formula, but generating a feeling that is expressed by the words of the formula. It's the feeling of a loving concern for the well-being of the person. And then the way I do it is to begin with the persons, and then when I build up some momentum in that way, then to go into the radiation, the directional radiation. So you can, if you haven't done this before, you can experiment in the different ways and find which way works most effectively, or combine them. In fact, in the evening, we'll be combining them in 2 sections within the evening session.
Great.
Another quick question. How
Well,
important?
Angela, let me just
Yes.
respond also to what you were
Yes.
what you were asking, just
Mhm.
as another perspective. So I agree with the Venerable, of course, that there's a lot of flexibility. And actually, when I first started, I only did the phrases, the recitation of the phrases, and did that for many years, and was quite happy with that practice, and really found that practice incredibly helpful. And now these days, what I tend to do is to do the recitation first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening. And then if I'm doing the radiating method, I like to do the radiating method typically on its own as like a standalone meditation if I'm going to do it that way. Particularly if I'm going to also perhaps do more than one of the Brahma Vihara. So, as I said, during this retreat, we're not going to do all four of the Brahma Viharas together. As far as I know, we're not planning on doing that. But you can do them that way sequentially during one meditation. That's also a very good way to practice. And in that case, I don't try to mix the phrases in there at all. And I use, as I was suggesting to you all earlier, I use the image as the kind of Kickstarter. So just as Bhante is saying, it is helpful usually, particularly if you're transitioning, from a busy day or from a state that's difficult, a mental state or physical state that's difficult, into doing the practice, then having some kind of something that will spark the feeling is very, very helpful. So whether that's the phrases or whether that's an image or something else. And lastly, I would add that I have been through over the course of years periods where I needed to start with metta for all beings first before doing metta for myself. That was what came more naturally to me. And then I would start there and then go to different groups of people and then maybe end with myself, rather than starting with myself and then groups of people and so on. So that's also flexible. I think that's, it can be helpful for people to do it in a different order.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Very helpful. I want to also ask
I think we have to give other people a chance to ask their questions.
But thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. So Marinelle, I think you were next.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. My question is about the radiating. I was so grateful when you said, think of the pictures of those children. It's just, yeah. And that was wonderful. And I could feel that in my heart. I felt that warmth. But when you say radiate, I think it has to be huge, it has to go out. And it doesn't. It's kind of just stays a little in my heart. And I can go in the different directions. I can feel it going in different directions. But I tend to say, well, I'm doing it wrong because I'm not radiating, And so I guess I'm asking for some reassurance that
Yes,
I have to work with what I have,
Exactly. Very true, Marina. You have to work with what you have. And let me suggest that, I try to subtly address this when I do the meditation by saying there's no need to strain or to push at all, It's just if you think about just letting the light flow and as much as it wants to, then I think, we shouldn't concern ourselves so much with the size of it particularly. It's just more important to have the feeling of it. And then, it could shift over time. It could grow over time. And just one day it'll start doing that on its own. I don't think that you would need to concern yourself with it particularly. But I do think that one thing that has been helpful for me in that regard was thinking about it in terms of boundlessness. So, what might stand in the way? Is it possible that the light could pass through whatever stands in the way? So maybe that's a way to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. And I also appreciate Bhikkhu, the flexibility of the phrases. And I feel like it's opened up almost a playfulness that is more freeing for me. Thank you very much for the teachings.
Great. You're welcome, Marina. Okay, I think Oki, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you, Bhante and Dhammadita. All your teachings sound very nourishing and helpful. I just want to ask a question. Is this metta practice suitable for a person who is very depressive and suicidal?
I think so. I think it would be an excellent practice,
Oh,
actually, for somebody who's experiencing depression. Bhante, yes?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I'd say it's, of all the different meditation subjects, this is the one that I would recommend most highly for somebody who has depressive tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay, Cynthia Chang.
Good afternoon, Dharma Masters. I have learned so much from both of you. The question I have is for Bichu Bodhi. This morning, when we were going through the 5 categories, the close family members were not part of it. So how did that fit into this? Because I'm going through the 5 category. I think you mentioned specifically like the loving kindness is different from like the love, the attached love we have with our close family members. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't rule out close family members, but what I said is that when choosing the very dear person, like the husband should avoid the wife, the husband or parents should avoid choosing their children, because there's something of like, call it a possessive quality that enters into that. And it becomes a bit difficult to discern, we call a pure feeling of a loving concern for the well-being and happiness of the other, if it's sort of overshadowed by that sort of anxious concern and attachment rooted in the sense of possession. That these are my children, this is my husband, this is my wife. So but I say that when I conduct my Wednesday meditation group, I don't make that distinction. Then I say, when we come to the dear ones, I say, just choose a few dear family members or dear friends. And I don't say to exclude this one or exclude that one. But here in this particular program, since we want to proceed sort of more systematically, then I say, and to get this sort of distinctive flavor of metta, I say to exclude those people towards whom you have that strong attached love. But you can still choose a very close friend, because there's a little more distance there than you have towards husband, wife, or one's own children.
So outside today's content, I think it's still good to send good wishes to
Definitely.
to the parents, to the kids.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay, excuse me, Deborah.
Oh, thank you for answering the question, and thank you for today. Months and months ago, I added the phrase, may all your best intentions be fulfilled. And I really find it powerful. It seems to incorporate the other wishes, and it sort of cuts through my inability to maybe sometimes recognize, oh, this person who annoys me just like me, wants to be happy. Yeah. So I know you say the phrasing is flexible, but I'm wondering why you included that phrase, and maybe how that particular phrase, I find it, even someone I might from afar think is, the worst, does political things. I'm just so humbled to think, yes, but they must have a good intention. And if that good intention were fulfilled, they would be happy. I would be, the power of it. So I'm wondering why you included that phrase, and maybe how the phrases are attached to intention.
Why I included it, I don't remember. It goes back quite a long time ago. I think maybe, but I guess it was similar to the idea that you had, that everybody wants to live a fulfilling life, and maybe I say that in myself, I want to have a sort of meaningful and fulfilling life. And so even when people seem to be very ordinary, just doing a very routine work, living a very, humdrum day-to-day life, or ordinary life, but still they want to find some deeper kind of fulfillment, whatever good, but we have to limit our wishes only to their good purposes. So we don't want the assassin to succeed in his attempt at assassination. We don't want the business tycoon to succeed in driving all of his competitors out of business, but we want people's good intentions to be fulfilled.
Yes, and I would add that this is going to come up again in the practice of mudita, right? In empathetic joy, that we want to experience empathetic joy with people's wholesome joy,
exactly.
not with our unwholesome joys.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Great. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, Bhante. Camille.
Hi, I really appreciated all that you've shared so far, and Ayadamadeepa, feel connected with you also because Shosan Victoria Austin's one of my teachers. And I wanted to ask about the practice that we were just doing in this kind of radiating metta. It seemed to me like it felt somehow connected to this absolute bodhicitta. Like I don't know if that's something that is exactly connected, but the reason I ask about that is because recently, a few months ago, we had a short intensive to learn, and part of what we learned was Tonglen. And I found the Tonglen very difficult as you're breathing in the suffering. It's supposed to circulate out as light, but it just felt difficult in my body. And then they said, oh, well, you need to strengthen your absolute bodhicitta, your grounding in that. And so it somehow, to me, like this sort of breathing in and feeling the light and breathing out and radiating it seemed connected to me. And I was just wondering what you thought.
Well, I don't know whether this absolute bodhicitta phrase has a particular meaning in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm not that familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, so I should issue that disclaimer right off the top. But I would say this, that as somebody who, is a dual lineage teacher and practicing with bodhisattva vows, that there is, I believe, a similarity between the Brahma Viharas as radiating, meaning encompassing all being and all beings, right? And the idea of bodhicitta, which again is boundless. It goes beyond our particular ability to embrace or not embrace individuals or situations or kinds of beings that we've never experienced before, or any of that. So in that sense, to me, it sounds like it has a similarity, but I don't know about the technical Tibetan aspect of it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think one more. Do we have time for one more before our last bit? One more question. So who's our next person? Ooh,
It could go to it could go to 4:55, I see.
Okay, so we might have time for 2 or 3 questions.
1:55, I think.
Please pronounce your name.
Shamali is my name. Shamali.
Shamali, thank you.
Remember Shamin and Emily you put together, and it's Shamali.
Thank you for the mnemonic there.
Yes, thank you very much for this retreat. It was very useful. We got some very useful information. My question is, when you're meditating, you said not to extend metta to the people who have passed away. There may be people who are like your grandmother and or a teacher whom you're very grateful, as well as you really like, and they are also among the beings, even though they have passed away, because they have probably passed away in this lifetime, in your lifetime. I mean, not like many eons away or something like that. So why is it that it has to be somebody who's living and not somebody who's dead? I mean, I'm sure there may be a very good reason. If you do have a reason, let me know.
This is for the development of the metta or loving kindness, where you're directing towards the person and wishing the person to be well and happy. And so the person, okay, let us say, I have a friend, let us just say Tom Jones. So that person has to be, when I'm wishing, may Tom Jones be well and happy, he has to be still in his existence as Tom Jones. He might have passed on to another, he might have passed away and gone on to another rebirth in some other form. And so there is a Buddhist practice called the sharing of merits or the dedication of merits, where you would, and we're going to be doing that this evening, in fact, at the end of the program today and tomorrow, where we share the merits that we've acquired through our practice with our deceased relatives and friends. But it's said that for the development of loving kindness, the person should be alive. And this is not my own stipulation. This is what has come down in the Visuddhimagga. And I think it's intended particularly for the success of the metta in bringing the attainment of jhana. Because the Visuddhimagga, that treatise I refer to, it relates the story of a young monk who was practicing loving kindness, aiming to get jhana, and he kept on practicing and practicing, directing his metta towards a particular person, but he couldn't get the jhana. So then he went to his teacher and he reported his problem to the teacher. And then the teacher said, find out the status of the person you're directing your loving kindness to. And so the young monk inquired through the chain of, word of mouth, what's happened to so-and-so? And then the word came back to him, oh, he passed away a week ago.
Oh, I see.
And then he realized he couldn't get that success because the person was no longer alive.
I see. All right, Bhante, because actually there is a time that we extend merit to those people who are passed away. It makes no sense. Thank you very much.
And that's done with loving kindness, but it's not the intensified meditation of loving kindness.
Right, I got it. Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay, maybe take one more question if it could be quick.
Okay, I will take a question then from the chat here. So there's from the chat, Angie sent a message, a question. Do I practice metta meditation after Vipassana meditation? And it says, thank you, Bhante. So maybe that's directed to you.
You can do, like if you're doing intensified Vipassana meditation, sort of at the end of the session, then you can do like a few minutes of loving kindness meditation, sort of to end the session. Sort of, I would say that doing it in the sort of general radiation way rather than the person by person directed way. Okay, yep. I think we should now.
Shall we transition?
I think this is where Carla should be coming in now.
It would help if I'd unmute myself, right? Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Ayadamadeepa and Bhante, for this wonderful, wonderful session. It was really, really great. And as with the other sessions, we would like to end with a short video highlighting one of our partners at Buddhist Global Relief. This afternoon, we're going to see a 3-minute video, actually a PowerPoint presentation from the North Country Mission of Hope. Yvonne will be showing this on her computer. North Country Mission of Hope has programs in education, healthcare, community, and ecological sustainability. And they also assist disaster-stricken areas around the world. BGR is supporting their education project for girls in Nicaragua. And so, Yvonne, if you're ready to go ahead and show that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carol Herring. I'm with the North Country Mission of Hope. And I first want to start with saying a sincere thank you for inviting me again this
I'm not
year
seeing the screen.
at your event. I wish you very good luck with this virtual event, and it's just a new way of communicating with each other across the world. The North Country Mission of Hope, we are in our third year of sponsorship with the Buddhist Global Relief Foundation. This sponsorship
Yvonne, I'm
provides
not seeing the
educational
screen.
sponsorship for 122 females, age range from 4 to about 22 years of age in Nicaragua. Our organization's compound is in Chiquilistagua, which is about 30 minutes out of.
Yvonne, I wasn't seeing anything. All I was doing was hearing that. So I don't know if there's an issue there.
I see it.
I can see it, Carla.
Okay, well then something's wrong with my computer. So
Yeah.
sorry
Okay.
about that. So,
Yep. Please go ahead, Yvonne. We can see the one starting slide anyway, where it says educational
oh, good,
scholarship.
because I don't even see that. That's great.
Managua, the capital, and the girls that we
Now we lost the sound.
sponsor are in 13 different barrios in very rural, remote locations, the majority of them, but a couple of them are in the city, and obviously the ones who attend in university are in Managua in the city. That is the only location that universities are in. The picture you're looking at is an example of a gathering that we have twice a year, where we give the school children their school supplies, maybe resize them for uniforms, get their biannual parasite medicine, and their height and weight checks. And I'm in the very front center, sitting on the ground with a white shirt, with the little girl in the yellow t-shirt in my lap. To help everyone who's listening to this presentation today understand the ongoing challenges that females of all ages in Nicaragua face are basically highlighted on this slide. They are in a country where women have no rights, even though there are some laws that were written, particularly in 2012, that were to protect women and children, but they were amended a few months afterwards, where if a female had a problem with a male, that she had to go to a court with her male abuser or whoever she accused of abuse, and had to face a judge. And of course, very few females proceed with that, and very few who do have any success, if it's rare. So, I mean, as you can see in the red, misogynist culture, femicide, human trafficking, rape, domestic violence. This is a constant environment that these young females are faced with at such a young age. And because of all of this, they are stuck in a perpetual cycle of poverty and a dependency on the men in their culture. So, as you know, missionaries and nonprofits who operate in Nicaragua and in many other countries around the world, we all know the only way to help these women rise out of poverty is in education. And that is why this grant is so important to these females. The Buddhist Global Relief Foundation grant, to me, is the full package. You know, we have donors through the years that will sponsor a few girls or pay for a uniform, but when we can have a complete package, uniforms, backpacks, school supplies, school books, shoes, socks, underwear, what we take for granted, underwear, dignity for these young ladies. Look at their faces. Look at what they're holding in their hands. They are thrilled. This is beyond anything they could expect. And again, they've never had a chance to meet you folks, and you've never had a chance to meet them. But they are so, so grateful that you care enough to sponsor them. And again, I just ask you to look at the faces of these young ladies, because they are joyful, they are happy, and they are just thrilled that someone cares enough to give them a chance in this world. So to summarize, what is the impact of the Buddhist Global Relief Foundation's grant? self-esteem, empowerment, socialization. Many of these girls live very, very remotely without children their own age around. Safety, equality, they attend school with boys, and hope. Hope for a future. Hope with a future that with a young lady who will now be educated, who will be able to go get a job, who will be able to be financially independent, who will be able to support her parents who never had a chance of an education. That is the impact of this grant. In closing, again, I want to thank the Buddhist Global Relief Foundation for your continued support of this program in Nicaragua. As you can see by this presentation, they are doing wonderful, these young ladies, in these trying times in their country. And again, they could not do this without you. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for that. Maybe next time you're doing metta, you might think of one of those girls and use that as your heart object, because it certainly does open my heart. When every time I think about those girls, I want to cry. And it's so wonderful that through supporting Buddhist Global Relief, we are helping those girls go to school. So I hope you all learned something today, like I did, and we will see you in a few hours. We'll see you again for the evening session, which will begin at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific time. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonte. Thank you, Aya.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
all.
Banji. Thank you,
Thank you,
Bodhi.
Aya.
Thank you, Aya.
From my heart.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all
So
later.
lovely.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Bantu.
Bye-bye.
Be
Thank
well.
you.
Okay, I'll see you later. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Aya. Thank you, Bante.
Okay,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Aya.
Thank you. Be well.
Same to you. See you later.
Okay.
Thank you for your metta.
Yes.